So today I thought we'd talk about the Resident Evil series. Probably my favorite series, possibly of all time in terms of the horror genre. I thought I'd just go through a few of the games and the ones I'm still hunting for. The majority of the Resident Evil games aren't that expensive. As I was showing you, there are a couple of GameCube variants that you're talking get up there. I suppose 35 to 50, £60. But we're not talking. Well, the most I've paid is about 39, I think. I'm still on the hunt for the the PS1 variants. Ironic, which are they are the more easier variants to get hold of as well. And there's a couple of variants on Dreamcast, and one expensive one game is the N64 Resident Evil 2 game, which is a feat of engineering in terms of how they got it to run on an N64. I believe it may need the memory expansion. I can't quite remember off the top of my head, but anyway, we'll get into it and we shall go from there. So first things first, really rough ass copy of Resident Evil. Not great, to be honest. I got it off eBay. It works, but it's pretty shite, to be honest. It's awful, to be honest. The manual's all stuck together on it. God forbid what's happened to it. But it is a platinum one, so. But it is the original Resident Evil, but it's not in good condition. It's pretty dreadful, to be honest. It's all stuck. It's gross. But it is the original Resident Evil. I want the director's cut. I'm still on the hunt for it. I've seen it a few places, and it's about 50 quid, commanding about that, well, 45 up to about upwards of in terms of the price range for the PAL equivalent. If you want the Japanese versions, they are a lot cheaper. But again, obviously you're going to need a Japanese or a region-free PS1, PS2. I'm probably going to do it on the PS2 up there. Probably going to do a Freemut boot so I can probably run it on there. And I didn't know you could get YouTube on the Switch, so that was kind of interesting. I kind of always thought of myself as someone that knows a reasonable amount about this stuff, but yeah, and the YouTube app seems to run quite well. I've got Resident Evil 2 running on there at the moment, remake. So yeah, that's game one. A really good game. Graphically, obviously, it doesn't hold up to today's standards, but it's such a good game, and obviously the remake is even. I didn't say the remake's better, but the remake certainly gives you the ideas, and the puzzles are a little bit more complex. But RE1's a really tough game. Really tough game. Not Resident Evil, but I thought I'd include it because it is basically Resident Evil with dinosaurs. I have showed this one before. Dino Crisis, even though it's not part of the Resident Evil series, it literally, it's getting up there. This is about a £35 to £40 upwards game now, I believe. 2 is probably even more, and 2 is more action based. So I prefer the first game, but it's also another really quite tricky and tough game to beat. I've never beaten it, but that might just because some of the puzzles on this are, and that's definitely taken from the Jurassic Park T-Rex for sure. But yeah, generally like really really good game. It's on PlayStation Network. You can download it. I think it's on PSN Plus Premium now, I believe. So you can stream it, and I believe you can even buy it. So if you get the chance, definitely buy it. Obviously, this is the PAL version, so obviously it's going to run at 50 Hz, and that wasn't supposed to happen. But that was about, at the time when I got it, was about 20 quid game. Now it's £35 upwards, I think, last time I checked. Depending on the variant, obviously. I just thought I'd show this for nostalgia's sake, and this is my old PS1. As you can see, it's seen better days. It is really yellow at this point. It is chipped as well, and as you can see, the thing has gets stuck quite late. It does still read games, but you usually have to put it upside down to read certain games, so probably something I would like to renew or get fixed, but I don't know if you can get the lenses for them, because it's, this is, what, 30 plus years old now. I got this in 96, so I mean, I'm 40 this year, so I feel kind of old. The most interesting thing about the PS1 variants is if you get the one that's got the AV sort of the yellow, white, and red jacks on the back, because it's a better version. It's not as reliable apparently as these models, but it is a better variant because you get better audio out of it. I don't imagine it matters nowadays. Discs are slightly irrelevant. This is a 7000 series model, as you can see. So yeah. So I just thought, for nostalgia's sake, it would be quite interesting. And oh man, Resident Evil 2 remake still so good. I still prefer the original, but even on that OLED screen, I wish LCD screen, it still looks pretty good. But I need to play through it again. I'm on a bit of a Resident Evil tangent at the moment, I guess. I've just missed out on a PS1 version of Resident Evil 2, and Resident Evil 3 Nemesis on PS1. So we go on to the next game, Resident Evil 1. This is the remake. I've also got this on PS4 and PS5 via is it the Origins collection? I think it is. When this was revealed, this was just so good. I remember it being on I think it was a VHS or a DVD. It might have been a DVD. And this might still be the best remake, even though 2 is so good. This might be the best Resident Evil remake. It's neck and neck, I would say that. It's not a particularly expensive game. You can get this very, very cheaply. It's about £10 to £15 if you're lucky on original GameCube. Or as I said, you can also get it on the Origins collection on PS4, PS5, PS3, I believe as well. Yep. Xbox One, Xbox Series S, Xbox Series X, and basically any of the Xbox One variants. The normal Xbox One, Xbox One S, and then Xbox One X. Jesus Christ, Microsoft, make your naming for your systems easier to remember. So, next game up, Resident Evil 2. This one came in at a cool £41, and that was the year before last, I think it was. I've loaded it up to try it out. It all works, but some of the prices, as I said, are getting up there with some of these games. The most interesting variant, as I've already said in the video, is the N64 game, which will command... You're probably talking £60 upwards on that particular version. It is quite an expensive one. But RE2 is probably, although I do have a soft spot for Resident Evil 1, any of the first 3 games in particular are absolutely brilliant. And as you can see, I've got the remake running on the Switch via the YouTube app, which I didn't know you even could get a YouTube app for Switch. So it shows you how much I pay attention to the Switch. Obviously, I've just repaired it, but or I haven't, I've just had it repaired for a tenner, which is pretty sweet, because Nintendo didn't want to know about it. So yeah, well worth picking up, and I will talk about the rumoured Resident Evil collection, if it's real. This one's a bit of a bummer. Unfortunately, I got this I got it from CEX. It was a decent price. Unfortunately, it hasn't got a manual, which is absolutely terrible. Although, in some regards, I guess that makes me a bit of a hypocrite, because I probably will get the manual, if I ever do, and then never look at it again. But it's just, I don't know, it's just aesthetics, I guess, more than anything. Resident Evil 3, ironically, I've said before, I started with this one on PS1. And most of the games I had were copied and chipped games, so it was we used to get them copied at school for a tenner. Obviously, I'm more legit these days, but you know, it's a teenager. A lot of people were doing it, to be honest. I don't agree with it, but it is what it is. But I'm more legitimate these days. But yeah, so it's an excellent game. It's well worth playing, and the timeline would be Resident Evil 1, well, 0, 0, and then Resident Evil 1. And then, sorry, the cat's just jumped on me. Resident Evil 1, or Resident Evil 0, Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 3, which is set before Resident Evil 2, like 12 hours before, I believe. And in my opinion, this is far superior to the remake. The remake's not bad, but far too much content is cut out of that remake. And it's quite sad in some regards. But the game isn't bad. It's still a decent game. It just it's just really disappointing they cut so much out of it. Because if you know the story, that Code Veronica and Resident Evil 3 were originally, I think the games were the other way, so it was supposed to be RE3 on, if I'm understanding, I could be wrong, on Dreamcast and then Code Veronica, but they kind of swapped them because the rumour is that Sony demanded a mainline titled Resident Evil game, so they sort of swapped them out. And obviously the rumour at the moment is Code Veronica, possibly remake, and Zero, and even Zero is a rumoured one. I haven't got Zero yet. I don't really like Zero. Oh no, saying that. I've got it on PS4 on the Origins collection and PS5. But it's a game I rarely go back to because I don't really like it. The biggest problem with Resident Evil 0 as a general rule is the game itself is actually not bad. It's the mechanics that ruin it. So the idea that you have to drop things, items, and then swap between the characters. Now the swapping between the characters isn't actually that bad. But the problem is, the enemies are pretty tedious. The leech fucking things, excuse my language, are an absolute pain in the ass and a nightmare to contend with. They're not fun. They're irritating, and you can only kill them with, I think it's Molotov cocktails as such. It's the only way to get rid of them, and they're a pain in the ass to deal with. Okay, so as I was saying, so remake rumors are Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil Code Veronica. Code Veronica is one that's deserving of a remake, in my opinion. 0, yes, definitely. It's a rough game, 0, in terms of the mechanics. As I said, I don't like the idea you have to drop items and then can't pick them up. It's just irritating. And the swapping of the characters could be an interesting idea if it had like a co-op option online, or even coach co-op, that sort of thing would be kind of cool. But generally, it's irritating. And the bit with the bat, oh my god, drives me up the flipping wall. But Code Veronica, you have various variations of this game. So RE1, no, not RE2, 3, Code Veronica are all on PS1, GameCube, and Dreamcast. Yeah, Dreamcast. And also, no, RE1 is also original RE1 is also on Sega Saturn, which is another variant I'm quite curious about. But I don't have a Sega Saturn because Sega Saturns are so expensive, unless you emulate them. And I'm not sure what the emulation scene is like with Sega Saturn, because the last, for me, Mega Drive was the last system where I was really into Sega, unfortunately. But I've got two variants of Code Veronica. I've got the PS2 version, which is the one I originally played. I had the other variant, though, not the Platinum Edition. That is dirt cheap. That is about a tenner. 10 to 15 quid at best. It's a very easy game to get hold of, and I sort of hope it has a remake, because I've never cleared Code Veronica. I also own it on PS5, and I've also got RE4, original RE4, on Xbox Series X up there as well. So, and here we are, the Code Veronica variant. Another variant, the GameCube version. Now this one is expensive. This one, I believe, came in at, and so RE4 GameCube was 15 quid, which isn't that badly priced. If I can find it. Let's try page 1. So I'm just going through my eBay listings on I have bought so much crap over the years, it's not even funny. So that Resident Evil I got, that Resident Evil 1 was 1950 in 22. 34. So that was £34. And that I got in an auction lot, but you can pick that up for about a tenner, maybe 15 pound a burst. There isn't a great deal of difference. The GameCube version, I believe, it looks a bit better. The PS2 version, the weird thing about PS2 is the video quality is very grainy on the PS2 version. I'm not really sure why that is. It's the same with RE4 as well. It's a bit of a bizarre one. The really only complaint I've got about this GameCube variant, it's a really minor complaint in the grand scheme of things, is let's see if I can actually shut the case door. Is I've got there's a little bit of damage on the back, like a pinhole or something's gone into the back of it. But generally, you know, it's in really, really good condition. So again, Code Veronica, very interested about the remake. I'm still on the hunt for quite a few Resident Evil games. Zero's another one, as I've said. I'd probably own Zero, but the problem with Zero is it's just one of those games I just wouldn't play because it's just not an enjoyable experience. It's got an interesting story, and it sort of explains how the origins of the virus breaks out in the mansion. Resident Evil is just it's a fascinating series. After you go past 4, 5 isn't. Let's be this way: 5 is not a bad game. It really isn't. It's a decent game, but it lacks kind of the Resident Evil charm. And 6 is exactly the same, except it goes way further, where it's just action all the time. Neither game is exactly what I define as bad, but they're just not Resident Evil games. I mean, the meme from 5 with Chris hitting the boulder is quite a good laugh. I'm not gonna lie, it is a good meme, and but they're both games. I haven't played much of 6. It doesn't interest me. I've cleared 5 on. I had it on Xbox 360, and it's not one of my favorite Resident Evil games, but it's not a bad game, and it doesn't deserve the sort of the unfavorable things people say about it. 6, on the other hand, you can say what you like about it because I could care less. I'm not interested in playing that game, and you can play them on. You can play some of the remakes on Switch, but they have to be via the cloud. So I don't know how that would work and what the latency is going to be like. But good luck with that on a Switch. But generally, Resident Evil 5 and 6. 5 isn't bad. 6. I don't know. I just after 5, I was not that interested in Resident Evil for a while. It was quite sad, but there's some interesting points in that game, and it's got co-op, which is good, and so is 6. But I prefer survival horror, crafting, searching for keys, that kind of thing. That's why I think Resident Evil 2, that obviously the one I'm showing on the Switch, would be amazing if they had like an online co-op version of the game where you could play as 2 characters and you could either stick together, and I've said this before, and search for items, or split off and go in different directions and then try and meet up. And it'd just be a really interesting concept. I don't know if they can do it. I would have thought they can with the technologies they've got nowadays and stuff, but I'd be very, very curious to see that. But I guess we'll see on the remake from what's going to happen. The Capcom have said nothing. They've been very quiet for the last couple of years, and it's getting a little bit boring waiting, but hopefully they'll drop a surprise on us. And last but least is Resident Evil 4. This is where some people say where Resident Evil went downhill. Resident Evil 4 is a fantastic game. It is by far, if you're not keen on tank controls, but you've heard so many people rave on, such as myself, of Resident Evil, this is the game you want to play. It's the entry point for all the Resident Evil. In terms of accessibility, this is by far the best game to play. Whether it's the original, this is the 2005 version, or the remake, which came out in 2023, I think it was, which is also, it's just a better version of this game in pretty much every way. You can move when you shoot, so that might be the version to play, but and this has been ported, 4 has been ported more times than I can count. I would say the GameCube version might be the best version, although some people will say the Wii version with the waggle and all that sort of stuff, not my cup of tea personally. But you've got that version as well. But this is on everything. So this is on GameCube, it's on the PS2. Again, PS2 has that weird sort of picture grain. I've got it on my PS3 down there, I think, if it's there. Yeah, on my PS3. It doesn't look particularly that great, if I'm honest. There's some weird porting that has been done on some of these remasters, I guess you could say. But it isn't. It's a fun experience. RE4, whether the remake or the original. It is on. So I've got it on PS3. I think it's on all the Xboxes, as I know it's on. I've got it on Series X, but it's available on everything. And obviously, the remake of Resident Evil 4 is also on Series X, Series S, Xbox One, Xbox One S, Xbox One X. Jesus Christ, Microsoft. And PS4, PS5, the original, and PS3 as well, I believe. So it's a and PS2, Christ, and it's a very very good game. The remake, I think the remake edges it out in some regards, but again, it just depends what version you want to play. I'm sure I might be forgetting a version, but there's so many variants of Resident Evil 4, including, as I said, the Wii version. Was there? It wasn't on Dreamcast, I don't believe. But oh, Christ, there's a lot of people that do a lot of variants of Resident Evil games, and the amount of variants and ports. Code Veronica also has. There's numerous ports. I've got it on the PS4 and PS5 version. I believe that's like a remaster they did for the PS3, which is slightly different to the other ports of Code Veronica on PS4, PS4 on 4, and maybe Xbox One. There's so many bleeding variants, and they've got some differences in terms of resolution, screen resolution. Some of the graphics are slightly different as well. Nothing major, but it's a weird one to say the least. But yeah, Resident Evil. It's awesome, and we can't forget the two I haven't mentioned. And they're probably better than 5 and 6. Resident Evil 7, the Ethan Winters sort of storyline. In my opinion, 7 is better than Village, which is Resident Evil 8 essentially. 7's just a really good horror game, although there is a lack of various variations in enemies later on in the game, but it's still fun. It's got a good horror sort of Texas Chainsaw Massacre type of motif, and it's really really good. It's just pretty stellar all the way through. Village is all over the shop, like the first bit in the castle with what's her name, Lady D. She's awesome as a awesome sort of villain character in the castle and the vampires. That's all really cool stuff. But then it gets muddied down with a lot more action-based stuff. But it's still a good game. I'd put it over 5 and 6, and probably even 0. But if 0 gets a remake and they get it right and they do something interesting with it, 0 could be a really good game. 0 is by far the black sheep of all the Resident Evils, by far. But I'm just kind of passionate about Resident Evil in general, I guess. Anyway, I've raved on enough. What would you like to see in a remake on 0 and Code Veronica? Code Veronica or Code Veronica X, depending on what variant you're talking about. Yeah, I'd love to see what they could do with that. And again, Outbreak 1 and 2, they would be stellar for nowadays because of all the online stuff. But I guess we'll see. And the last thing I will say is Resident Evil Collection. You can get it on GOG. Original 1, 2, and 3, and I think 2 is based on the PC version because you can play as Chris Redfield in the Extreme Battle Mode, and that I believe that was on. I think it was just on PC. I think, and obviously the Resident Evil 1 variant on Sega Saturn is an interesting one as well. Some graphical differences. It looks really good. It's just Sega Saturns, man. I'm very interested in them. I've said this before, but money and time. There are other really good horror, Dead Space series, Silent Hill. I've got Silent Hill Remake. I've got Silent Hill 3 as well, which I've not touched. Obviously, Dead Space has had a first remake as well, which is apparently very, very good. I've yet to play it. There's so many horror games out there now. And I think what else was there? The Last of Us. People keep telling me to play The Last of Us. I don't know. I might have to try it, but I don't. Oh, I'm not that keen on Naughty Dog games, if I'm honest. Other than I like Crash Bandicoot when that was around, and I enjoyed Uncharted, but I don't know. I just, I will play it one day. I'll have to because everyone raves on about how good it is, particularly Part One. Um, but I think for me, the problem I have with The Last of Us is they kill characters off in films, and I hate that kind of shit. I just think it's, I just think it's lazy writing, killing characters off. I hated that um, in any film you can think about. Some of the films I really love are those old aviation films like Iron Eagle, which I just thought is just it's just a rip off of Top Gun in a lot of regards. In the whole concept of it is just ridiculous. But they kill him off in the second film. That's just as a child that just irritated me beyond belief. So anytime I hear of a character getting killed off screen in the sequel, it just winds me up beyond belief. They did it in Alien, the follow-on prequel, the second prequel. Is it Elizabeth Shaw's character? She's just dead. I was like, I can't. That's just lazy writing. It's just crap. But that's my biased opinion on it. Anyway, I'm gonna leave it there because I'm gonna rave on otherwise. And thank you for listening to me rave once again.